institutional behavior, central bank positions, liquidity being focused around regulatory frameworks. What regulatory frameworks? We're talking about the IMF, the BIS. Now, my point, though, is that gold is going to provide stability and intrinsic value for where this is all going. And I think XRP is going to be that layer, enable settlement, transfer that can move value like gold across markets, creating a bridge for traditional and digital finance. But the trend is clear, in my opinion. I think gold is going to anchor value, and I think XRP will move it efficiently. I mean, this is what the infrastructure is telling me years before it may happen.
I think we're going to see a reval, Bursan. We're going to see a reval. It's not going to be just one item. It's not going to be just one asset. How would it be if you distract from the XRP reset reval? If you have a $20,000 gold reval, you have a $150 silver reval, or $200 reval for silver, and at the same time you reval your XRP to be 1,000 or 2,000. Now that's a big jump for XRP. That'd be like, 1,000 would be 400 from what it is now.
You're basically saying, to complement it, basically if gold's price is quietly being revalued at some point to support this new system, basically to backstop the tokenized reserves and these debt instruments, it's very possible we're going to watch the early stages, but eventually get to a place where global repricing takes place. And that will actually require XRP to match that value that's flowing across.
And the gold reval and silver reval will be a distraction. People won't focus entirely on the fact that they just jumped XRP more than 100-fold. And that will be to enable its proper designed function. Yes. We cannot have a global adoption of XRP with a $50 price. It will not work. So what we might get is a segmentation coming, where there'll be some BRICS nations, there'll be Japan, Korea. I think the United States is going to be a laggard. We're going to be a laggard. We're not leading. We're not leading jack shit. We're leading in congressional disunity. We're leading in civil war. We're leading in election fraud. We're leading in border disputes where we can't even control our own borders. We're leading in cartel warfare. We're leading in bickering, partisan bickering that shuts down a stupid shit government. We're not leading in jack shit. That's why I think we're going to be following the rest of the world. And I just read an article today. It said Japan is now considering that they should follow the BRICS movements and initiatives rather than the Western, because the Westerns are so bent on war and bickering.
Well, I think they're fighting for survival, and they're just disguising it as national security. And here's another thing to your point. I actually tweeted this like a year ago, that if you look very closely at some of the things we talked about, Jim, it would seem that something is being built called ARC, where basically America, Russia, and China are going to have a coalition against the European countries. And where I'm going with this is interesting. I'm going to ask you about it, and I want your honest, unfiltered take without getting me kicked off YouTube, if that's possible. But it's very possible that if you look closely at everything, it seems that we're moving in the trajectory of the BRICS nations, but we're not calling it that. And we just keep showing American strength when really, I mean, example, 16 states in the US are now putting laws in place to make gold and silver legal tender. We are looking at silver, and we talked about this last time, where it might even become a strategic asset for our government. So if you look closely, that was very interesting. Exactly. Right. So when you start to think about these things, and this is where I want to get your thoughts on, because this really ties this conversation together at a much deeper level. For many years, we've talked about this, but we're now talking about the restructuring of global finance. We're talking about gold reemerging as collateral. We're talking about XRP forming that digital settlement layer. But behind all of this, and this is where the other discussion comes in, There's that old story of the old guard, the entrenched financial power structures, the deep state, the banking cabal, whatever you want to call them, this architecture. These are the same entities that controlled the legacy systems, intelligence, defense, big finance. Do you think that they're going down, or are they fighting right now? And, what are your true thoughts about this ongoing battle? Because I think while we're witnessing some form of decentralization expand, we're seeing also the opposite take place, the rollout of digital IDs, the tokenization of everything, own nothing and be happy, the increasing control mechanisms that are wrapped in language and innovation. You know what I mean? So it's something I worry about quite often, and I've made it very clear I will not participate in the system if they try to force some chip into my skin or something along those lines.
I call it the banker cartel.
Sure.
And they've got a cartel business model, and it's loaded with profit, and it enables fraud. It permits fraud with impunity, insider trading. I mean, JP Morgan, duplicate serial numbers for treasuries, a certain building in South Manhattan that went down. Yeah, loaded with that kind of data. I believe 9/11, I'm sorry, that infamous day in September, 24 years ago.
Thank you.
That was a bank event. That was a banker event. I believe the banking cartel is now on notice. You adapt to the digital framework, or you're obsolete and you will not be able to compete. You will not be able even to be included and integrated. I gave an example to a client during a consult call. Imagine there are 4 big banks, maybe think of 4 Wall Street banks. And one of them says, we don't want to join the digital transformation. We don't want that architecture. We don't want that. We're going to stick with what we have. We're comfortable. We're comfortable. We know what we have. We're comfortable. And we got a nice business profit model. We're comfortable. 6 months later, they're out of business. Okay, so adapt, get integrated, or become obsolete. You're not going to be shown the door. You're going to be outside looking in. All right, so now the whole battle changes form. Verson, this is really delicate stuff.
Oh, I know.
And here's how I put it in real terms now. BlackRock and JP Morgan said, we want to be involved in the control of this. Ripple, how do we do it? Work with us. We're not going to hand you the keys to the kingdom and have Ripple with a bank license, and we all work with you. And before you know it, Stellar has a bank. Before you know it, Hedera has a bank. Before you know it, other, Cardano has a bank. And then all of Wall Street's working for you guys. It's not going to work that way. So BlackRock and JP Morgan asked Ripple, how do we get there? Can we become partners without killing each other, without crushing each other in competition? And that's why I think they're holding it down under 250 with XRP. And that's why I think BlackRock is looking for 3 to 5 billion coins. JP Morgan is looking for 3 to 5 billion coins. And a couple of other Wall Street banks are looking for the same, so that they can earn $100 billion and be major players for the next chapter.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take, and I do appreciate it, because I've thought something very similar too. My brother and I have had this concern. We feel like we're witnessing this very strange convergence. You have decentralization on one hand, and you have centralization happening simultaneously. Because blockchain was really built to empower sovereign individuality, transparency, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, we do see giants like BlackRock, Vanguard, JP Morgan tokenizing assets and inserting themselves as gatekeepers of this new digital economy. And that's almost, in my eyes,
they can't execute the trade. They can't execute the transfer
without XRP.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
That's the partnership.
But this is where it gets weird, though. It's It's almost like the deep state. Two things to this. Okay, deep state realized, you know what, we can't stop this technology, so they decided to co-opt it to a degree. We can argue on that.
They're trying.
But then there's the other side. This is where stable coins come in, because stable coins change the dynamic of the conversation entirely, because they're being used now to provide a new source of liquidity that can extend these kick the can down the road cycles even further. That means institutions can manage systemic risk and maintain broader market stability, sure. But when you look at, for instance, stable coins overall, and yeah, sure, Tether, we can definitely tie this to Tether, but the proposed digital dollar, it gives the perfect example of what we're talking about here, because it allows the US Treasury and the Federal Reserve to expand the reach of the US dollar in a digital format. And this is essentially basically the deep state getting its hands into the pie. And I said this word for word long before David Sachs stood right by Donald Trump and discussed this live. It was really, it gave me goosebumps. So I think that's their mechanism to get their hands into this ecosystem, but they still need XRP.
I think the stable coin is the bridge. The key word is bridge. BlackRock and JP Morgan. Let's just, those two, if you can solve it for them, you can solve it for the rest of Wall Street. You can solve it for the big regionals.
I'm going to show you something.
BlackRock and JP Morgan need a bridge
to
the digital world. Go ahead.
This is it. I did a whole report on this in detail. This is one of the bridges they're using with the whole stable coins. Stronghold. This is what they're using to get a lot of the value on chain. And like you said last time, so what if they use Bitcoin? So what if they use Ethereum? Let them bring it on board. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're using this technology to do it. It's one of them. Anyways, yeah. I've researched this thoroughly and I've shared it with the audience before. And by the way, anyone investing in crypto, this is certainly a massive opportunity.
Oh, I think that's easily 100x coming.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I heard about Stronghold 2 years ago, and I've got
hopefully for me. No,
I have a client in Texas who's loaded up with Stronghold. Okay, the key is bridge from one world to the other, and you know Cardano's. Oh gosh, I can't think of his name. The Cardano's president.
Charles Hoskinson, if I'm not mistaken.
Hoskinson, something like that. Anyway, yeah. He basically raised a white flag. What he said was that, okay, reading between the lines, the interpretation of what he said was that Ripple has won. Ripple's strategy has been successful. Ripple and XRP are bridging the old traditional banking world with the new digital world. And Cardano's mistake was to be too pure, was to be too exclusive with digital and no relationships to tarnish and dirty their hands. Cardano did not want to talk to Wall Street and BlackRock.
Yeah.
Ripple did to make them partners. Ripple is going to be the bridge asset to link the giant financial firms and financial markets. And not just that, but the big financial departments for the giant corporations. Like,
yeah,
you know,
I mean,
Apple's financial department, IBM's financial department, Apple's financial department, Amazon's financial department. They're huge.
Well, yeah, XRP is becoming a global reserve asset then. We can say this. There's no argument over it anymore. It's
we're hearing the word Treasury Reserve. Treasury. XRP
I think in the early stages, absolutely. But later on down the road, no doubt, the XRP by intrinsic design is supposed to absorb value and consolidate value. That's how it becomes. Everybody holding an XRP token essentially is holding a stake in a system that is gradually consolidating everything around it.
In a protocol. Now, how long will it be before Google announces this? I'm just fast forward 18 months ahead.
Yeah,
okay?
Trend forecasting, yes.
Google announces and Amazon announces they've got a $20 billion profit from their XRP held in their treasury.
Yeah. Yeah, things just really start to get out of
And
control
and
here.
the Amazon stock and the Google stock goes up tenfold. Okay.
And this is basically the real play, how XRP could be used as leverage later on down the road. Another discussion for another time.
And other, Silicon Valley firms,
Mm.
they know about the development with XRP better than most of your average Joes running around in St. Louis, Detroit, Denver, and Atlanta and Miami. Okay, I focus on bridge. Okay, Unix was interoperable across computer architectures. XRP is interoperable across different financial systems,
Yes.
structures, and their own protocols and their own, oh gosh, what's the right word? Their own standards. Okay, when I was at Digital, we had huge arguments over whether you could use and how long will it take to take a bunch of software, a whole library of software for IBM and make it usable in digital. Unix solved that. XRP is going to solve the same thing, interoperable.
Right. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to recognize that, it's a complementary ecosystem to a degree, but there are assets that are going to form some sort of natural hierarchy of finance. You will have like a kind of a central bank. I think Ripple is on its way to becoming that, a bank, basically a trusted custodian. Yes. And an alternative to central banking. You have retail markets, which are very important. Of course, I think XLM is fulfilling that role to a degree, and that's debatable as well. And then you have the payment rails. So each of them is interoperable. They're all built to flow and bridge to each other, and they're all compliant with the regulatory framework. So this is kind of what you're referring to, a new messaging standard that's being adopted globally by banks and central banks and individuals alike and small businesses and so forth.
Let me introduce yet another important point from my notes. It's hydraulics. You've got 100, 200, 500 major corporations in the United States, Canada, Western Europe. They all have to play ball, collaborate, and become partners with the bridge asset for doing their transfers. How many are there? XRP, XLM, Cardano, HBAR.
Strategic assets.
How many different strategic corporations are there that have the coins, the altcoins that work? Cardano. There was one more that I missed. I can't think of what it was. No, I said HBAR. But
you can count them in. I know they're in there for a fact.
XDC.
I
thought XDC was going to be a major player for stock market transactions.